If you were captured by a group of losers who wanted to punish you for bullying them, what would you do? No one is coming to save you, and they will do the most brutal things to make you suffer. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the outcasts in the final. This student is going to regret being a bully for the rest of his life. Brad here walks into his classroom and sits down behind this shy kid, Ravi. He starts to get bullied as the bigger student smacks him on the head, but their teacher notices and tells the boy to change seats. The kid obeys, but the bullying doesn't stop, and they have no idea that Ravi is going to destroy their lives. Later that day, the shy kid sits in the lunchroom with his friends. They're all losers, but they're sick of being abused, and together they make a plan for payback. They're going to secretly invite their enemies to a party at a house deep in the woods, and nobody will know who organized it until it's too late. They've set the perfect trap to get the most brutal revenge they can imagine, but that's when a milk carton suddenly crashes onto their table. The bullies start cheering, and the shy kid walks over to confront them, but this guy stands up and makes a racist joke. Ravi heads back to hang out with his friends when the student Curtis suddenly approaches the group and invites them all to a video shoot he's working on. He might be the only person in this school that treats them kindly, and the group decides they'll spare him from their plan. Later, they go to the house in the woods and start preparing for the party. Dane here checks in with his friend Jack and tells him he has something that will help them get their revenge. He takes him to another room where he opens a crate full of guns, and they're not going to give their bullies any mercy. That night, the students have gathered and are enjoying the party, but they have no idea that this place is about to become a death trap. That's when the losers gather on the balcony and realize there's a problem. The nice guy Curtis has shown up to the party, even though they all agreed to leave him out of their revenge plot, but it's too late to back out now. With that, the group sets their plan into motion, and one of the friends hands this girl a glass bottle filled with poison before emptying its contents into the punch bowl. Okay, this is a disaster waiting to happen. First of all, it's a high school house party, and nobody here looks like they're interested in moderation. In a crowd with this kind of company, you should almost expect that the punch bowl is going to be spiked with something. But what's strange is that nobody stopped to consider why there was a punch bowl in the first place. Punch bowls are for school dances and church potlucks, not for a house party full of rowdy teenagers. They should be serving jello shots and Jaeger bombs, so this should have been the first sign that something is not right here. The group of outcasts are lucky that nobody questioned it, but if you break it down, everything about this was still a horrible plan. Right now, their goal is to poison everyone so they're all too sick to stop them from getting revenge. Now, it's not a bad idea, but the biggest problem with this is that there are about 16 other people here, and they're not all going to be drinking at the same time. If the others start passing out, it won't take long to realize that they shouldn't be drinking the punch, and the first person they'll be accusing is this girl right here. She's been the only one at the table serving drinks, and when the blame falls on her, they're going to unmask the girl and realize that she doesn't belong here. At that point, all the losers will be busted, and they'll get kicked out of their own secret party, so it's fair to say that if it wasn't just a movie, this strategy wouldn't end well for them. The smarter thing to do is first remove everyone's chances of escaping by locking the doors and windows and slashing everyone's tires in the parking lot. Then, organize a party event where everyone has to drink, like a toast or a drinking game. This would have used peer pressure to make sure that all of them had enough poison in their bodies to carry out the plan. Now, the other students honestly should have seen this coming, because there were plenty of signs that this was going to be a bad night. Their first mistake was attending a party deep in the woods without even knowing who invited them. All of these kids seem to be pretty close friends, but if nobody knows whose party this is, then it's pretty f***ing weird that it didn't come up in conversation, and it should tell us that something is not right. Now, it's important to mention that no one deserves to be mistreated because it's flat out wrong, but if you had to bully someone, it definitely shouldn't be this guy. Look at his notebook here. Ravi is drawing pictures of himself carrying a sword that's dripping blood. If you're the guy that makes his life worse every single day of the school year, then it's reasonable to assume it's your blood he's drawing, and it might not take much to push him over the edge. Because just like he's not expecting Ravi to get his revenge, you're not expecting Raid Shadow Legends, a game perfect for his geekier hobbies, available on mobile and PC, with badass monsters, cool champions, and clever strategies that will pit you against hilarious greatest villains. Summon and assemble your party of heroes, and send them off on adventures to raid the land for epic loot. They've recently added the Hydra Boss, a challenging multi-headed monster that'll be difficult for any player to beat with its versatile moveset and overwhelming debuffs. Each head has its own special way of taking down your champions, and it's up to your own skill to figure out the best approach. I'm really liking the player reward system they have and gaining new champions to add to my collection. It's always fun to see who I'll get next and test out different team compositions in battle. And I'm not gonna lie, I mostly just pick the ones I think look the coolest. They're going to be adding tons of other features to the game, such as new champions, a new faction wars crypt for the Shadowkin, more rewards, and even more tournaments full of prizes. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get a starter pack and a free mystery champion ready to fight your enemies as soon as you play. This offer is exclusively for new players, and you will find these rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. Thank you to Raid for sponsoring this video. Refilling their cups, they all drink the punch, completely unaware that it's been spiked. The poison kicks in and the crowd begins passing out all over the room. Their plan is working, and the losers put on these terrifying masks before stealing everyone's keys and phones. No one can call for help, and with the victims lined up in the center of the room, this kid turns on the stereo and wakes them all up. The bullies slowly realize they have been chained together, and the leader here explains they're about to be punished. The students can't believe what they're hearing, and this guy makes a joke, refusing to take this seriously, but he's just sealed his fate. The leader explains his friend has a bolt gun used to kill livestock, and it's a perfect way to demonstrate how serious they are. The student starts to panic as this kid dressed as a scarecrow brings the bolt gun over and shoots him straight in the jaw. He falls to the floor in pain, and the scarecrow shoots him again, this time in the knee. One of the bullies asks why they're being punished, and he tells them it's revenge for all the abuse they put them through. The victim is dragged out and left in another room, making that one bully down with 5 more to go. The leader asks if anyone wants to go home, and this guy Tommy raises his hand. To everyone's surprise, the kidnappers set him free from his chains, and they let him walk over to the door. They even give him directions to reach the closest road, but there's a catch. He'll be hunted down like an animal for sport, and the others watch as their friend leaves the building. That's when the leader reveals to Tommy's girlfriend that he was cheating on her and rubs it in her face. He's enjoying every second that someone else is getting bullied, but this plan is going to backfire. Outside, Tommy is running for his life when suddenly a gang of kidnappers appear in the distance and start to chase him. They've been sent to hunt him down, and the bully dodges their gunfire but steps right into a bear trap, and there's no way to escape. He can only lie there as the riders close in on him, and he's brought back to the house and left with the other victim. That's 2 bullies punished, with 4 more to go. Okay, these kidnappers are total idiots. They're wearing masks to protect their identities because if the victims survive, they don't want to be tracked down. The problem is, when this guy asked why they were being punished, the leader explained this is revenge for all the abuse they put them through. This narrows down the pool of suspects to a very specific group of people. All it would take is matching his height, body composition, and hairstyle to find him in school and make his life a living hell. In one sentence, this moron just gave them all information they need to figure out who their captors are, and that suddenly makes this an extremely dangerous scenario. Right now, these bullies have one saving grace, because as long as the kidnappers are hiding their identities, it means they might let them go. There would be no reason to still have masks on if their plan was to murder everyone, but that changes if the victims know who the kidnappers are. It forces their hand, and murder becomes the only way to fix the problem. If I were these bullies, I would be trying to reinforce that we have no idea who they are and desperately want to repent for our sins. I would even go so far as to stage a come to Jesus moment and volunteer to be tortured as a sign of contrition. It's such an unexpected response that the kidnappers probably wouldn't even know how to process it and move on to another victim instead. Now, trying to escape is the worst thing they could do, because nearly every single captor has a gun. It's a completely hopeless scenario as long as we're in this room, but that's why it was the right decision to take their offer and be hunted for sport. Being freed from the handcuffs and changing the environment gives us a lot more control over the situation, and it's easily their best chance at finding help. Even though they have ATVs and bright headlights, they're still carrying a disadvantage with them. Because if you look here, you'll realize that none of them removed their masks. These things are really obstructive to their vision, and since it's the middle of the night, our chances of escaping are actually in our favor here if we go about this the right way. His first mistake was to run through the widest path in the forest. This makes it easy for them to chase you because their vehicles fit comfortably, so it's better to run diagonally and keep as close to the trees as possible. Once there's a dense thicket, I would go through the trees and quickly change my direction. It takes a lot more time to steer their ATVs in a narrow environment like this, and it gives us a chance to lose their trail. The next mistake was to run towards the light. This kid is headed straight for the clearing because he's more likely to find help, but they can already see where he's going and he'll never outrun them. The goal here should not be to escape, but to hide instead, because if we lose their trail, they'll end up looking for us in the wrong direction. In the main room, the leader tells the group to reflect on what they might have done to deserve this, and Brad here suddenly starts crying. He's terrified and demands to know how they could be so cruel, but the leader explains that this is karma for all the horrible things they've done in the past. That's when the clown grabs the vial of poison and tries to pour it down this boy's throat, but when he starts resisting, the kidnapper stabs him right in the shoulder. The others are too scared to intervene, and the clown dumps the liquid into the bully's mouth. He starts seizing on the floor, and the group can only watch as their friend goes completely limp. Brad here asks what they've been poisoned with, and the leader reveals that his friend is now completely paralyzed. But as they're distracted, nobody notices that Ravi has dropped the key next to Curtis here, and soon he'll be the only one that can save them. In the front of the room, this girl sits on top of the paralyzed bully and unrolls a set of needles. Showing one off to the crowd, she stabs it right through the man's neck as the others look away. It's horrifying, and they're unable to watch as the girl keeps plunging more of them into his body. The man is still alive, but can't do anything as he's dragged into the back room with the other victims. That's 3 bullies punished, with 3 more to go. The students are terrified as the kidnappers scan the room to choose their next victim. But Curtis here sees an opportunity and decides it's time to break free. Using the key, he unlocks his chains and runs for it as the leader starts shooting at him. Protecting his friend, the clown suddenly tackles him to the floor, but the traitor is quickly overpowered and held down. The others are confused as Ravi explains that Curtis was the only person who was nice to him at school. He wanted to save his life, but it's the last thing he'll ever do, as the leader plunges a knife into his chest, killing him. This girl runs to her dead friend, shocked that the leader would murder one of his own, but the man explains that Ravi betrayed them. This is the consequence for his actions, and anyone who tries to stop their plans will be punished. Okay, this is escalating quickly. Not only are these kidnappers willing to kill their bullies, but also kill anyone who gets in the way of their plan. As scary as it seems, it actually reveals some pretty useful information, because it shows us that they're not loyal to each other, they're loyal to getting revenge. If we're careful, we can actually use this in our favor and turn the kidnappers against each other. Using this information as a weapon, I would tell them that I want to confess all of the terrible things I've done. This would pique their interest, and that's when I would accuse the banjo player of witnessing Ravi drop the key and did nothing about it. If you look at his positioning in the room, he's sitting right in front of where Curtis was sitting, and should have heard and seen everything that happened. It's definitely a Hail Mary tactic, but it might spark enough suspicion for them to turn on themselves, and that's exactly what we want. The more we can make them afraid of each other, the less dangerous this gets for us. Now, Curtis here managed to get away, but he honestly should have waited for a better opportunity. It's important to realize that if these kidnappers were smart enough to capture 16 students, then we should expect that they also locked the windows and doors while everyone was knocked out by the poison. We need more information about our environment, and if we run for the exits, there's a chance we'll find ourselves trapped inside and it'll just get us killed. If it were me, the first thing I would do is unlock myself, but then secretly pass the key to the person next to me and see if it unlocks theirs too. Handcuff locks are all designed with a universal shape, so one key can unlock almost all of them. This would let us free everyone, and if we all ran for the door at once, we would have the element of surprise. If you're in the back like Curtis here, the crowd would give you plenty of meat shield cover to escape without getting hit by a bullet. If we find out that the key only unlocks our own chains, I would have waited until I saw one of the kidnappers leave the house to make sure the door wasn't locked. It would also be a lot smarter to escape while someone is getting tortured, because all eyes will be on them instead of on you. This banjo guy isn't holding his weapon, and neither is the needle girl here. But this guy only has an axe, which has limited range. That means all we need is to distract the leader here, and the best opportunity is when someone is being punished. Instead, he chose to run while literally nothing was happening. The kidnappers were idle and waiting to choose who their next victim would be. This is easily the most poorly timed exit strategy you could think of, and he was lucky to escape with his life. Outside, Curtis sprints through the woods as the kidnappers hunt him on ATVs, and it's only a matter of time before they catch up to him. That's when he sees a police car in the distance and runs up shouting for help. The cop gets out and raises his gun as Curtis tells the man people are being killed at the house down the road. He doesn't understand what the boy is saying, and suddenly gets shot to death by the kidnappers. With no other option, Curtis grabs the man's gun and runs away. Back at the house, this girl is mourning Ravi's death when her friend Jack enters the room and tells her they'll be punishing their next victim. The girl is still angry at their leader for murdering Ravi, but speaking out will only get her killed. They go to the main room where they tie this girl to a chair and apply a strange cream to her face. The leader explains that the cream is acidic and will slowly dissolve her flesh. It's a brutal punishment that will scar her for life, and that's 4 victims punished with 2 more to go. That's when one of the kidnappers whispers into the leader's ear, and he tells the group that Curtis tried to get help, but the police officer he found was shot dead. No one is coming to save them, but Brad here has had enough. He calls the leader a coward for hiding behind a mask, and the kidnapper decides to take it personally. Walking up to him, the bully tries standing up in defiance, but gets clubbed in the head with a rifle. He dares the leader to show his face, and agreeing, he takes off his mask, revealing himself to be his worst victim. It's Dane, and the student can't believe he would have the guts to do something so evil. That's when the kidnapper makes it clear that Brad deserves everything that's going to happen tonight. Okay, this guy is an idiot. Daring your kidnappers to take off their masks is a death sentence, because now that we've seen their faces, there's no way they'll let anyone out alive. Brad here's playing right into their hands, because these kidnappers actually want us to know who they are. Revenge is more satisfying when your enemy knows you've defeated them. And now that they've revealed themselves, the punishments are just going to get more personal. The other victims in the room should have told Brad to shut up and sacrificed him to avoid anyone from taking off their masks. They knew that this guy was the worst bully of them all, so as soon as he's dealt with, it will be anticlimactic to punish anyone else. This kid is the main course, and if they get their sweetest revenge out of the way, they might take it easier on the rest of the group. Now, Curtis here got lucky finding the local sheriff, but unfortunately, he played the entire situation the wrong way. After the cop was killed, he grabbed his gun and ran off, but never stopped to realize that behind him was the perfect getaway vehicle. Earlier, this cop was sitting in the middle of the woods smoking, so it's more than likely he still had his keys in the ignition. The most logical thing to do in this situation is to grab the gun and run into the vehicle, because the worst case scenario is there are no keys, but the car adds protection from the bullets. The best case scenario is that there are keys inside, and we can drive back into town while we use the police radio to call for help. This one decision could have ended their night of terror, but instead he ran straight into an open field and managed to narrowly survive by the skin of his plot armor. Now, if there are no keys in the ignition and we can't contact anyone on the radio, the best thing to do is exit from the opposite side of the car. That way there's still a barrier protecting us, and we'll be able to run to the closest tree line for cover. You might think it's best to start shooting at the kidnappers, but that won't be as effective as you think. A 2018 study of the Dallas Police Department found that in over 230 incidents, only 35% of shots fired managed to actually hit the suspect. These are police officers who go through extensive firearm training, and if they can't even stay on target, then a high school kid firing into the night wouldn't hit the broadside of a barn. The smart thing to do here is to find the closest cover and use the gun to call for help. This looks like a 9mm pistol, meaning it would fire a shot at 162 decibels, which can be heard from at least 1 mile away. Now, the International Emergency Sign of Distress is a sequence of 3 signals, and this could be anything from 3 blows on a whistle, 3 flashes of a mirror, or in this case, 3 shots fired from a gun. If anyone is nearby, they'll know we aren't hunting deer and alert the authorities to investigate the situation. Meanwhile, Curtis finds a house in the woods and knocks on the door begging for help. That's when an old man comes out with a loaded rifle and tells him to put his gun down. Curtis tries to warn him about the murderers, but the man refuses to listen. Instead, he tells him to turn around and knocks the kid out. Back in the house, this girl begins to comfort Brad, who begs her not to hurt him. Suddenly, this redhead realizes she knows her and accuses the kidnapper of being Emily from their school. The girl stands up and takes off her mask, revealing her face to the whole room. The other kidnappers follow suit, removing their own masks and exposing their identities to the entire crowd. Seeing they're surrounded by the losers they've bullied, the redhead knows they want revenge and apologizes to Emily, begging to be spared. The kidnapper promises not to hurt her in exchange for cutting off every single one of Brad's fingers. It's a good offer, but she can't bring herself to accept the deal. So Emily decides to make the offer to Brad instead and convinces him to take her deal. Meanwhile, Curtis wakes up tied to a chair in the middle of a dark room. The kid begs the man to call the cops, but he refuses to believe that the boy's being hunted and thinks he was being robbed. He tries to intimidate the kid, explaining he fought in Vietnam and isn't stupid enough to fall for his trick. There's not much Curtis can do here, but when he sees the medals on the wall, he tells the old man that his grandpa also served in Vietnam and his dad was in Desert Storm. This catches the guy's interest, and he starts to realize there might be more to this than he thinks. Curtis convinces the veteran that people are being killed at the house down the road, and the old man decides to investigate the situation. Okay, Curtis did not think this through. When he found the house, he ran up to the front porch and started banging on the door, but never stopped to realize that he still had the gun in his hand. Showing up to a stranger's house with your weapon drawn is not a good way to ask for someone's help. But it's even worse when you realize this kid is in rural Texas. 45% of households in Texas own guns, which is approximately 13.2 million people. With those kinds of statistics, a greeting like this is a surefire way of getting yourself shot. And it's not a surprise that the old man saw him as a threat. What's strange though, is that this veteran didn't call the cops either. That is sketchy as hell, because if this guy actually thought his life was in danger, there's no reason to bring him inside. He tied the boy up in his living room but didn't gag him, and he wasn't waiting for the police to arrive, so there must be another reason for his actions. Now, Curtis here was very smart to observe his surroundings. He noticed that the man had 3 medals on the wall and served in the United States Army, and if the man served his country on this level, it will help us understand how he might think. Every detail in this house can tell us who this man is, and the more information we have about him, the better we will be able to gain his trust. Look at the items in this room. He has a 500-piece puzzle in front of the sofa and a huge shelf full of books. This is not the living room of a killer, and if anything, they're both signs that he wants to hear what we have to say. Studies have shown that people who read are much more empathetic and make better citizens. Reading improves your ability to understand the thoughts and feelings of others, and with a bookcase as large as this one, there's good reason to think he's interested in helping once he believes we're telling the truth. Now, as for this girl, she f***ed this up big time. Her kidnapper gave her a choice between cutting off her fingers or Brad's, and she honestly should have taken the deal. I'm not saying it would be easy, but it's a lot easier than living with stumps for the rest of your life. If the girl was being clever, she would have realized that this kidnapper actually set an interesting precedent that punishment can be negotiated. I would accept the deal and cut off Brad's fingers, but explain that if we remove all of them, then he'll be pitied the rest of his life. People will be taking care of him, and that's not going to teach him the lesson he deserves. The better thing to do is leave just enough fingers for him to stay independent and make his life a living hell. He won't be able to play football, texting will take forever, and everyone who sees him will think he's a freak. It's twisted enough that these kidnappers might be convinced, but the truth is that it saves Brad here from losing all 10 fingers and will only have to do half as much work. Back at the party, the redhead has been strapped into the chair while the boy kneels next to her, holding a pair of clippers in his hands. Neither of them want to be tortured, but the bully is too scared of being punished and slowly cuts her finger clean off. It's brutal, but he's still not done as the leader tells them there are 9 more fingers to go. Reluctantly, Brad obeys and chops the redhead's middle finger off. That's when Emily offers to spare her if she inflicts the same punishment on someone else, and the redhead agrees. She switches places with Brad, but before they begin, the kidnappers decide to make things interesting. The lights suddenly start to flicker as the redhead holds the clippers to the bully's fingers, but she can't bring herself to cut them off. Disappointed, the leader switches the lights on and Emily decides there's only one way to get what they want. Picking up a bowl, she walks over to the girl and begins applying the acidic cream to one half of her face. She makes it clear that the girl has 2 minutes to cut the bully's fingers off or else her face will dissolve. The redhead raises the clippers to the boy's fingers, but still can't go through with it. She's bravely refused their final offer, and now she'll have to suffer the consequences as the cream begins to melt her face. Outside in the woods, the old man goes out to investigate the house when he notices a guard standing watch. He carefully approaches him, and that was his biggest mistake. The man sets off a tripwire, and a spiked board swings into his legs, brutally stabbing him. He rips himself free from the trap, but can't walk and falls to the ground in agony. The guard runs over, aiming the gun straight at his head, but suddenly collapses to the ground. The old man has shot him and quickly rips off his mask, revealing the face of a dead high school student. He realizes Curtis wasn't lying to him and crawls away to get help. Okay, this could have been handled a lot better. The veteran went out to investigate the situation because he realized that Curtis might be telling the truth. but he never asked the boy for any details. If we're going outside to investigate, I would want to know how many kidnappers there are, what weapons they have, and if they're using radios to communicate with each other. A veteran with medals hanging on his wall should have made sure he knew what he was walking into, but instead, this guy walked straight into their trap. Now, the irony here is that this is not an ordinary trap. These spikes are referred to as punji sticks, which have been used in many different ways, but they were made famous in the Vietnam War. If this man was in his 60s, he would be old enough to have served in Vietnam and should have been very experienced in identifying these kinds of traps. He clearly understood the threat because he saw the scout with a dirt bike and rifle. Now, I'm no soldier, but if I was sneaking up on someone in the forest, I'd be a lot more worried about how much noise I'm making because stepping on one stick could give away my position. If this veteran was watching his step to stay quiet, he would have seen the tripwire and avoided it. The biggest problem with this entire situation is that he went out alone, when he should have brought Curtis along to keep an eye on him. It's only a matter of time that he will wriggle out of the rope ties, and the man even left a pistol on the table behind him. For a veteran, these are terrible choices, and I would have called the police a long time ago to handle the situation so I could get back to my puzzle. Now, as bad as that was, it's not nearly as dumb as this girl right here. She was given 2 chances to avoid being punished, and still couldn't get it done. They even tried to make it easier by turning off the lights and blasting music so that she wouldn't have to witness the horror of chopping off someone's fingers. If the girl was being smarter, she would have realized that this was actually a huge blessing in disguise, because if the lights are off, that means the kidnappers have limited their own visibility. This gives us an excellent opportunity to take advantage of them and try to control the situation. If it were me, I would whisper in Brad's ear to pretend that I'm cutting off his fingers and start screaming. The kidnappers wouldn't be able to see well enough, and I'd use the element of surprise to make a run for it. There's a doorway behind her that looks like it leads to the kitchen, and it would be reasonable to assume there's another exit from this side of the house. If Curtis could escape, then we know they haven't locked the doors, and since she's already unchained, it's the perfect opportunity to escape. In the old man's house, this kid tips the chair over until it crashes to the floor. Freeing himself from the rope, he walks over to the phone and immediately calls the police. He uses his best white guy voice and tells them he saw a group of black men with guns robbing the house down the road. Curtis is finally able to get help and runs back to rescue his friends. At the party house, half of the redhead's face has been scarred by the cream, making her the 5th victim punished with 1 more to go. Brad here is the next person to pay for his sins, and the leader wants to do the honors to make things personal. The victim begs him not to cut off his fingers as the kidnapper pulls out his knife, but decides to do something else instead, promising that this bully will never be able to hurt anyone ever again. He apologizes for years of torment, but it's too late, and the leader explains he's just figured out the best way to punish him. With 1 single touch, he can take away everything that brings him joy, and suddenly stabs the knife directly into his spinal cord. Instantly, the bully becomes paralyzed from the waist down, and there's nothing he can do to resist. That's 6 victims punished, but they're still not done. Outside in the woods, this kid dressed as a German officer notices the dead guard and realizes he's been shot. Looking around, the kid spots the old man in the distance and walks towards him. But when he bends down, the old man suddenly stabs him. The kid collapses to the ground as the veteran finishes him off and takes his mask off, discovering another dead high schooler underneath. In the house, Dane here announces that soon the sun will rise and this will be all over. But this bully dressed as a sailor starts to talk back. He tells them that this is illegal and they'll all be going to jail, but Dane here disagrees. He explains that he was going to let the sailor go free, but actions have consequences, and since he spoke out, the sailor is going to be the one punished next. Okay, this guy is the dumbest person in the room. He decided to throw a tantrum about how unfair they were being treated, but if he took a moment to read the situation, he would have realized that these kidnappers were already wrapping things up. The leader here was literally in the middle of giving his final speech and told them he hopes they've learned their lesson. This is not something he'd say if he was about to slaughter everyone, so it's pretty clear something has changed. These kidnappers should be roaming the room looking for their next victim to punish, but instead, they're all lined up in the front. It's possible that once they got revenge on the king of the bullies, they were finished, and if this idiot kept his mouth shut, he might have been allowed to live. Now, we can't be sure that they were going to set them free because all these kids go to the same school. The victims already know who their kidnappers are, and once they're released, nothing is stopping them from calling the cops. Logically, there's an equally good chance that this ends in a mass grave if we don't play this the right way. So if I were in this situation, I would have been developing a plan for the worst case scenario and make sure everyone in the group knows what to do. Up until this point, the problem with escaping has always been that there are too many kidnappers with guns, and it would be too easy to get killed. That's why the only way we could possibly overpower them is if we can draw them towards us all in one place. This sailor would have been the perfect distraction, because he was able to lure everyone holding a weapon into a single area. This is the perfect setup for an ambush, because one of them will need to put his weapon down to unlock us, which will leave only 2 armed captors. If it were me, I would wait for the guard to unlock my chains, and then have the 2 closest prisoners charge at these kidnappers. Once we have them under our control, we can take their guns, and the unarmed girl here will have to surrender. Obviously, a lot has to go right for this to work because it's taking a massive risk, but we also have to recognize that this might be our last chance to escape. If we're in a situation where it's clearly the end of the road for us, then this sailor's distraction would have been the perfect opportunity to take control. Meanwhile, Curtis here finds the veteran sitting against a tree, exhausted from his injuries. He asks the kid if his grandpa really was in Vietnam, and Curtis confesses he made it up to gain his trust. It took a lie to convince the man of the truth, and he tells the kid to leave him behind to save his friends. Curtis takes the words to heart, but he'll soon find out that not everyone can be saved. Inside the house, the kidnappers are getting ready to cut the sailor's tongue out, but the leader suddenly realizes Curtis has come back. He reaches for his rifle, but the kid points his gun straight at him and demands that they turn themselves in. Dane here urges him to leave or he'll regret it, but Curtis won't back down and fires a warning shot into the air, insisting they let everyone go. Ignoring him, Dane orders his friends to cut out the sailor's tongue, but Curtis shoots the German officer dead and gets shot in the process. Walking over to Curtis, this kid takes aim and is about to finish him off, but before he can fire his gun, someone shoots him first. This girl has betrayed him, and she announces to the group that she's done with this revenge plot. There's barely anyone left in their circle of friends, and the remaining 2 kidnappers can't go on. Deciding to put a stop to this, the boy puts his gun at her head and pulls the trigger. In the end, the only people left are the other students, and the punished victims are rescued by the police. The survivors try to move on with their lives as best as they can, and even though they're traumatized, at least they've learned a valuable lesson. Never drink the Kool-Aid. But what do you think? How would you beat the final? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.